The cases that hit the media the hardest are those where a kid goes missing. Even in the world of today, it's difficult for us to imagine anybody who would want to hurt someone so vulnerable, and yet it happens on a daily basis. What makes these cases even worse is when the parents or family members are involved, which is why we still talk about people like Casey Anthony and the parents of Gabriel Fernandez. The case we're exploring today took place during a period where everybody was on high alert as far as their kids' safety was concerned. It was the case of a missing girl that captivated a nation, only to reveal weeks later that the victim's family had us fooled the entire time. This is the disappearance of Shannon Matthews. The year was 2008, and in the UK, where our story takes place, the world was still reeling from the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. On the morning of February 19th, 9-year-old Shannon Matthews left her home in Dewsbury, West Yorkshire, to go on a trip to a swimming lesson with her class. Her mom, Karen Matthews, said there was nothing different about her daughter when she went off to school that day, but by that afternoon, their lives would be totally different forever. By 4 p.m., when Shannon still hadn't come home from school, her mom got worried and started looking for her around the neighborhood. It was really out of character for Shannon to not come straight home, especially at that time of year when it got cold and dark super quickly where they lived. Karen's neighbors helped her look around, knocking on doors, seeing if Shannon had gone to a friend's house or something, but she was nowhere to be found. They even called Shannon's school to make sure she'd been back to the school after the swimming class, and they confirmed she did. This was the last time she was seen publicly before she vanished, since school ended right after they got back from class. Close to 7 p.m. when they still couldn't find her, Karen called the police and a massive investigation started. Over 200 police officers were used to help look for Shannon, and it quickly became a high-profile case, with photos of the missing schoolgirl plastered all over the front page of every newspaper. Since the McCann case had happened less than a year earlier, everybody was super focused on finding Shannon and not leaving another family with an unsolved disappearance. As well as the police, appeals were made to the public to help look for Shannon or come forward with any information about her. Karen's neighbors and hundreds of people in the surrounding neighborhoods took time out of their own days to help search and raise awareness by handing out flyers and putting up posters. At around this time, there was a lot of speculation about what kind of home life Shannon had before she vanished. She was actually one of 7 children, and only she and one of her brothers had the same dad. This would be the start of Karen's downfall in the eyes of the media, and many people suggested that she was just having kids so she could claim money from the government, since she was a single parent. There were also concerns about Karen as a parent. When Shannon and another of her siblings were super young, they were placed on a child protection register. This means social services believed they were at risk of harm, but they were removed from the list after a year. A former neighbor, Claire, in an interview, described what kind of conditions Shannon and her siblings were living in. She'd gained this insight when she'd taken Shannon into her own home after Karen was taken away by police during an altercation with her partner. Claire contacted social services and expressed her concerns about the well-being of Karen's kids, but it seemed like no matter how many times she called, nobody seemed to do anything. She remembers that the house was so disgusting that she wouldn't even let a dog in there. What made it worse was this wasn't the first time complaints had been made about Karen's parenting. She'd been reported to social services since the birth of her first child, all the way back in 1996. During the investigation into Shannon's disappearance, there were also concerns about how Karen was reacting to the situation. According to reports, she would start dancing anytime she got a call on her cell phone and could cry on cue whenever she was in front of the cameras. Despite this, there was no physical evidence to suggest that Karen had anything to do with her daughter going missing. Police were starting to think that Shannon had run away from home, but something bad happened to her during her escape. When the police first searched Karen's house, they found words written on Shannon's bedroom wall, saying that she wanted to go and live with her dad, Leon Rose, who confirmed his daughter had been asking about coming to live with him before she vanished. More people began to believe this theory after Shannon's best friend Megan gave an interview and said she saw Shannon walking the wrong way home from school that day. However, there was nothing to suggest that Shannon had ever made it to her dad's house or that he had anything to do with her going missing. At this point, the police were running out of leads. When they began investigating why Shannon would want to run away and go live with her dad, the police didn't have to look far to find an answer. Karen's boyfriend, Craig Meehan. Craig was 10 years younger than Karen and the biological father of her youngest child. He'd been living with the family for a while before Shannon vanished and considered her his stepdaughter. However, complaints had been made about Craig, specifically that he'd harmed Shannon. Once these facts came to light, Karen and even Shannon's dad, Leon, were quick to defend Craig and say that there was no way he'd do anything to hurt her. But not everyone was supportive of Craig. Karen's own parents, June and Gordon Matthews, gave an interview in which they criticized Craig and their daughter, agreeing with the claims that Craig was less than a perfect stepfather. More than once, they'd arrive at Karen's house to find one of the kids crying, saying that Craig had kicked them or punched them in the stomach. Of course, both Craig and Karen denied this completely. As the weeks went by, as with all the news, Shannon's disappearance started to fade out of the daily news and become just another background story. With no updates or clues, the investigation started to lose momentum, so much so that a British tabloid, The Sun, put out a reward for £50,000 for Shannon's safe return. And then, on March 14th, just shy of a month since she disappeared, Shannon was found, and she was alive. That day, investigators went to talk to Craig's uncle, Michael Donovan, at his apartment close to where Shannon lived. They knocked on the door but got no answer. They assumed he wasn't home until a neighbor told the police they'd definitely heard someone in the apartment. They called for backup and broke down the door to get into the apartment, and within a few minutes, they found Shannon and Michael. It was discovered that Michael had made a hiding space inside of his bed frame, big enough for 2 people, and he had been hiding in there with Shannon when the police turned up. Inside the apartment, they also found a bunch of different medications, including medicine for travel sickness and antidepressants. Michael had been using these to intoxicate Shannon and keep her hidden. After he was arrested, he confessed to his crimes pretty much as soon as he got into custody. The police learned that he hadn't been working alone. According to Michael, he and Karen had worked together to fake Shannon's disappearance in order to make money. He told the police that they planned to leave Shannon in the center of town and pretend to just find her there, collecting the £50,000 award from The Sun. With no way to confirm this yet, the police had no choice but to allow Shannon to briefly reunite with her mom, dad, and stepdad. Because she'd been made to take so many substances during her captivity, she was kept in the care of social services and could only be questioned for a few minutes per day. But that was all it took for her family's story to start crumbling. They arrested Craig first, but not for the reason you must think. He did know about the staged disappearance, but during their investigation on him, the police actually discovered he was in possession of some disturbing images involving kids. Next, they arrested Karen. It was reported that when she first reunited with Shannon, she seemed super cold and didn't want to spend time with her daughter, who'd supposedly been missing and miraculously saved after a month. It's never been confirmed what led to her arrest, but it's more than likely because Shannon told social services about her mom's involvement. This news completely horrified pretty much the whole of the UK. This investigation had cost the police over £2 million, and they'd used a lot of their resources to try and find Shannon. Karen was named as the world's worst mum, and even if she got off lightly with her prison sentence, she'd never be able to escape public hatred. In a trial that lasted for 3 weeks, Karen and Michael were found guilty of faking Shannon's disappearance and causing an unnecessary police investigation. Craig was also found guilty of possessing the images found on his computer, which contributed to the belief that he'd harmed Shannon before the fake disappearance. Craig was only sentenced to 20 weeks in prison and walks the streets as a free man today. Karen and Michael both received sentences of 8 years in prison, but Karen only served half of that and is now living with Craig again in an unknown location. As for poor Shannon, she spent time in the care of a foster family despite her grandparents offering to take care of her and her siblings. In the end, so she could move on and have a life outside of this horrible event, she was granted a new identity and stayed totally out of the public eye. As she is now in her 20s, we can only hope that Shannon has been able to work through what has happened to her and is out there living a productive, fulfilling life. That brings us to the end of today's video. What do you guys think of this case? Can you believe they were able to fake this for so long? Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below.